Hey everyone, Ben here. Welcome to another episode of the Stellar Work podcast, number 36. I'm your host Ben and I'm excited to introduce our guest Nick Brown. Nick is an experienced agility consultant and author of the book Real World Agility. Nick has spent over a decade working with large organizations like Royal Mail, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Nationwide, and ASOS, helping teams to improve how they work and deliver value through real evidence-based agile practices. In this episode, we dive into what agility really means in the real world, why context matters so much, and how learning from mistakes can drive genuine organizational change. Nick shares his stories from his career, practical tools he uses with clients, and advice for everyone navigating the evolving landscape of agile roles today. So whether you're a seasoned agile practitioner or just curious about how to make change stick in your organization, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Nick, welcome to the Stellar Work podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Hey man, you wrote a book about real world agility and I was like, oh, finally someone writes how it really works. And I was going through your work back and forth and all sorts of stuff that you post on LinkedIn, and I felt that we had a bunch in common. So I thought, why not reach out and let's record an episode together?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, it seems like even from your recent post about what this chart shows, and I was like, oh, okay, we definitely are like-minded. So yeah.
Yeah, I will post a bunch of more charts because it feels like it gives people a good way to connect and to sort of spin ideas on how the world works.
Yeah, and you use real data as well. So
yeah, I try to anonymize it. I hope my clients do not check my LinkedIn, but maybe after this episode they do. All right. So everybody else who has not met you yet, maybe you should give us all a brief introduction to who you are.
Sure thing. So I'm Nick Brown, agility consultant now. For so long, I was a permanent fixture of large organizations. Now I've gone the consulting route. So I'm kind of all about helping organizations work more effectively and proving that we're working more effectively through the use of data and information. And as well as that, I like to share things that I build. So I build a lot of open source stuff, give it kind of free back to the community. So I like to think that's the way we will further our practices across different organizations, so stuff isn't hidden behind a paywall. I've been in Agile world about 12 years, different large organizations, different roles, Scrum Master, delivery manager, product owner, product manager, lean portfolio management, all those type of things. So I've seen lots of things go wrong and a few things go right. And yeah, I like to bring all that experience to the table when I work with different organizations.
You made me curious now. Why did you pronounce the word consultant? Were you going to say agile coach and then you sort of went the other way?
Yeah, I think it's past its sell-by date a little bit, that title. But you know, for all my previous roles prior to this one, I've only been here in this role a few months. I've always been a permanent employee, so kind of you're not really a consultant in that sense.
You were at PricewaterhouseCoopers, Royal Mail.
Yeah, Royal
ASOS.
Mail, PwC, Nationwide, ASOS was the most recent one. So all like large organizations, albeit getting progressively smaller each time, but still large, thousands of people organizations. So yeah, and so now I'm on the kind of consulting side of the fence, so working with different clients and helping them bring about agility to their context.
And you wrote a book about that, which is called Real World Agility. And before we dig into the content of the book, I have to ask you a question. And I hope it's not going to hurt too much. But why did you call it Real World Agility? There's already a book out there called Real World Agility. By another guy called Dale James. I can't pronounce his last name, however.
I only realized that after I put it out that there was another book called that. And it was because I was playing around with the title for ages, and it was originally called like Flow Value Culture Delivery, an Evidence-Based Approach to Agility. And when I was sharing that with people, they were like, "Well, it's too long. It's too much of a mouthful. You need something snappier, something that people remember, something that will um, be obvious to people as to why they should buy the book." So I went with that just because of I think where the industry's at, but also like I'm sure you've heard it so many times when you present an approach to something or a way to solve a problem, and you get the inevitable, yeah, but how does that work in the real world? So I went with that because I think that's kind of
Yeah.
appropriate right now. And then it was when I put it out, I saw that there was the book of the same title. A funnier aside is that there's also an author on Amazon called Nicolas Brown who has a
Oh,
book about erectile dysfunction.
oh
So
God.
even that is like I just can't win either way. So
Uh,
I'm not the author of a book about erectile dysfunction. um, so yeah, when I put it out, I was like, oh, that's annoying, but it was too far gone. I'd paid for the artwork, I paid for the cover and
yeah,
everything. I
yeah.
was like, I'm not changing it now.
But have you met Danielle? Because
I
that
have
would be
not,
so
no.
funny.
No, I am waiting for that. Why did you not check with me that you called your book the same thing? Because it's like it's not even like a catchy slogan where we could be in different industries. It's like
Yeah,
no, we're
yeah,
literally in the same. But
yeah, yeah.
maybe I'll check out his book.
All right, all right, all right. Um, and funny enough, you mentioned that everybody's like, okay, but how does that work in the real world? And what I actually mean is, how does that work in my context? Because everyone has their own real world, right? It's very different. One team is producing like a dating app, maybe for iOS, and another company is producing a fighter jet. Those are completely different real worlds. And I'm wondering, like, I haven't read your book. I should. I just created a Lean Pub account because I saw so many great people on it. Um, like, what is agility in the real world? Or
Um,
maybe we start with something different. What is the real world you're talking about?
so the real world is it's my lived experience in the organizations I've been in and putting this stuff into practice. And what I've deliberately done with the book, which I think is a differentiator from other books you hear or read, is that I include all the times I got stuff wrong and why it went wrong, because that's a better reflection of the real world for people. I think too often we read about these great ideas that these thought leaders come up with, that it's on the latest keynote at an Agile conference you go to, and it's like, here's my new idea, and it's an acronym. And it's like, that might be useful, but how did you get to this point?
Hmm.
And what were all the things you got wrong along the way? And I think some of that stuff, if you can share it with people, they might be doing the same thing. So it helps them realize that sooner that they're doing the wrong thing. And I also think it shows, for me anyway, it shows real growth as a practitioner. If all you're talking about are silver bullets or just great ideas, there will always be a context that you haven't tried it in where if you tried it, it would fail. So I deliberately wanted to share lots of experience and stories of putting it into practice because there's enough stuff out there that's theoretical. Like Flow World, you can look at things like Little's Law and look at the work of, people like Deming, and you can go to conferences and you'll hear about Cynefin and stuff like that. And all that stuff, like, it's not that that stuff isn't important, but if we look at probably the last 2 years over the industry, a lot of organizations are getting rid of these type of roles because unfortunately the people that are in them can't put this stuff into practice and they can't translate it to the needs of people that aren't in the agile bubble.
And what do you think is the reason for that?
Many things, probably the biggest, people that have become agile coaches overnight, people that have gone on a 2-day course and haven't got it wrong, people that um, not in that much of a disrespectful sense, but they don't know how software gets built.
Hmm.
They can't talk even with like a degree of technical understanding. It's not that you need to be able to read code, but you need to know how products get built through different environments, for example, and make their way to production, and understand the bottlenecks and things that can occur with that. You need to talk about things like continuous deployment, continuous delivery, continuous integration, and a lot of people come away from a 2-day course where they've got some initials they put after their name on LinkedIn, and they just focus on all the wrong things, but they're the things that they understand, and
Mhm.
that like don't actually really mean things. You know, your classic things like story points or running fun retrospectives. I think that's the other thing as well. You know, kind of this where a lot of people in agile roles are focused on kind of like having fun and not producing results. And you know, it's not saying you can't have fun, but when that becomes kind of the primary focus, I remember a Scrum Master community of practice, and when they got together every 2 weeks, they used to talk about two things: how do you do something in Jira, and what fun retro have you run in the last few
Yeah.
weeks?
Yeah.
And it's like, if that's what you're kind of producing as results of Scrum Masters, don't be surprised if your job's on the line in a few months' time. So yeah, it's kind of a bunch of those things thrown into the melting pot, I think, in terms of why the industry is where it is.
Have you seen the recently published extended extension of the Scrum Guide
I
that was endorsed by Jeff Sutherland?
I have, yes.
For everyone
Like
who wants an interesting discussion, they can hop on GitHub. There's something going on maybe.
it's
Um,
yeah, it's
I'm
just yeah.
wondering because it really much it's based on we've trained thousands of people on the material that we thought is useful to really implement those practices and drive the needle forward on companies when it comes to speed, agility, adaptiveness, you call it. And now that that has failed to some degree, let's say, they add more content and
Mm,
train more people on more content.
yeah.
And what I heard from you is actually an opposite direction, a direction that I'm also very much in favor in. Is like taking the context into account. But how do you do that? Like if you go on on a project, if someone is hiring you, or if you get an interims role at, let's say, a project manager or CTO or interim scrum master, any of that, you can pick and choose where do you want to go. What would your approach be?
So I think in the past, what I've probably done where I've gone wrong is that I've wanted to overhaul things. I mean, like, all these things are wrong. This is how it should be. So this is what we're going to move towards. And that's like, well, you haven't considered context there because you don't know how they got to that point.
Hmm.
So I think it's kind of, for me anyway, setting your stall out as to, okay, 3 months from now, what would good look like from an outcome perspective? Now that could be increased value delivery, it could be improved flow of work, it could be moving the needle so we're focused more on outcomes, or we're actually prioritizing work. And then it's kind of incrementally trying different things that are moving towards that outcome. So it's not a case of, coming in and saying, Scrum is rubbish, you should do Kanban. Because it's like, oof, that's a big thing to just immediately rubbish everything that's come before you.
Yeah, I mean
Um,
it's the same thing as saying waterfall project management is crap. Here is Scrum.
yes, yeah, yeah,
So it's just like another turn.
yeah. So yeah, very much kind of spend your time really observing, learning, understanding why stuff is the way it is.
Hmm.
Focus on what would good look like 3 months from now, and then it's going to be, well, what are the small tweaks we're going to make to get there?
And
So
how do you do that? Do you have like techniques or do you use like software or what is your
um,
approach?
I I've got my own tool set when it comes to certainly evidencing some of those things.
Hmm.
So if a focus was on improving the flow of work, then I've got a bunch of my own open source tools where it's kind of like hooks into the team's backlog in ADO or Jira. Let's understand where we are right now. And it's like, okay, we're going to positively move this metric as well. So it's not even a case of this should be the number we will be at in 3 months' time. It's kind of like, well, let's just focus on like a minor, improvement in that sense. So reducing 85th percentile cycle time by 10%. Then it's kind of, for me, I keep a log of kind of the things that we're doing to try kind of nudge that, and then a log of like what we might try next. So it's not doing too many things at once because then you don't. really know what's moving the needle. So
Hmm.
with my current client, for example, I'll be focusing, one of the areas we're focusing on is improving flow. So one of the ways we're going about that is we're automating work item age in all our work items in Jira and changing the weekly delivery meeting so it's focused on flow. So we focus on where stuff's blocked, how long it's been in progress for, what do we do around unblocking that. Not a case of, right, we need to completely shift and we need to move from Scrum to Kanban because it's like, well, I don't want to undertake that.
Yeah.
That cognitive load is too much for people. Other things, they're indicators you're on the right path, but they might not be the end result yet. So with the same client, one of the things I've observed is the lack of focus on outcome thinking. It's very much just do the thing, so very output oriented. There's no real visibility as to like what's going on now, what's coming next. So one of the things we're introducing is roadmaps with an outcome oriented measure against those items. So we're not even at the point where we'll be able to demonstrate we've moved the needle with some of those things, but at least we're trying to shift the thinking as to, right, okay, if it's on your roadmap, what's going to be the measurable outcome that will happen as a result of that?
And
And
I
if
can
there isn't
hear,
one,
and,
then
and, and I
hurry
can
up and
already hear a couple of guys from the Agile community saying that, hey, if you have roadmaps, you're not really Agile. Because then you just crank down a big backlog and put it on a timeline. But it's not like, in a sense, you start with an idea you want to test, you want to mitigate risk, and the rest is more vague in the backlog down there. Is that what you meant with you just start with how the client operates?
it could be that. It could be that. So it could be, they've just got a list of things and their roadmap is very output feature oriented. And it's just adding a little tweak as to, okay, like if that's your classic roadmap, almost like
Mm,
Gantt chart style, if that's a blob, then all I want you to do is underneath the title, put the outcomes that will come from it.
yeah.
And if you're putting not applicable or you don't have anything to put in there, then I'm not sure we should be doing it. And if your whole roadmap looks like that, then I'm pretty sure we're not focusing on the right things. Or they might be the right things, so let's think about how we might measure the impact. Um, yeah, I don't subscribe to this notion that a roadmap, you can't be agile with a roadmap. I think that's just kind of like someone's had a bad experience and therefore everything is a bad experience when it comes to road mapping. And that's just not true. And certainly, if you're wanting to succeed in a large organization, coming with a stance of roadmaps aren't agile, you're not going to last very long because it's just not pragmatic at the end of the.
When you do those things with your clients, and maybe you can share a story about that, how do you measure progress and what do you see? What are the changes you see in those organizations when you work for them for a couple of months?
I think if we're talking about the roadmap one, certainly that if they've never thought that way around articulating outcomes or measures of success, you're going to have to do a lot of the groundwork for them.
Hmm.
Um, I think if 2 or 3 months down the line, they're coming to the table with, I've got this item, I put it on the roadmap, and this is how I think we'll measure success. That for me is an indicator we're on the right path because that's the kind of behavioral change that we're seeing with them is that they're not just putting the latest feature that someone from the C-suite has requested. Similarly, if we're focusing on things maybe from a flow perspective, if it's shifting from story point estimation or even like how many items did we do this sprint versus how many did we plan, and we're shifting towards more flow-based metrics around, well, we've improved cycle time, we've reduced our 80% of cycle time, or we've reduced WIP, then that's again the indication I'm looking for is that they're changing their behavior and they're incorporating these things into their day-to-day, which means they don't need me as much in terms of holding their hand and showing them what they should be looking at.
And when you say improve cycle times, what do you think is like the average potential that you would see in a client when it comes to improving that?
Oh, I don't think you can answer that. Because
Like if
yeah,
clients would adopt those ideas and practices, could they be like twice as fast?
what like twice the work in half the time and
Yeah,
all that
maybe
stuff.
that. Yeah.
Um, I I don't think I could definitively say, right, if you do this, then you're going to be twice as fast.
Hmm.
I think if there are certain things you do, you could certainly see an improvement, and most likely a double-digit improvement in terms of reducing that time. Often it comes with focusing on flow at the higher level. So, for example, one of the teams that I work with, they aren't using anything flow related. 85th percentile, 14 days or less. Pretty good in terms of organizations where I've worked in and like seeing high performing teams. But the whip at the level above that, the portfolio level, epic level, whatever you want to call it, it's like 21 items in progress. So it's like, well, actually, that's where we should be focusing our effort, less at the team level. Certainly, I think at that level, if you start to focus on flow, that's probably where you see the biggest improvement. It's almost certainly where throughput would double, and your cycle time would probably be cut in half because most organizations are just neglecting that level of flow. But that's just based on my experience, anyway, in the organizations I've been in.
And when you're approaching a new organization, what is your what is the strategy of really understanding the system before you sort of run your interventions?
A combination of like one-on-one, just talking to people,
Hmm.
and then observing how teams interact, and then invariably you look through some documentation the organization's cobbled together over the years, but you find it invariably doesn't really work that way. So it's a lot of observation. I don't tend to like to ask questions when it's the whole team or a group of people together because I think that can land the wrong way, I found. So I think focusing on kind of if you've got questions, write them down, but discuss them one on one with people to get a bit
Hmm.
better context. And yeah, spending a decent amount of time, a few weeks, I would say, observing and kind of really learning as to this is how work gets done. And then also being prepared to see that there might be that instance a month from now where you think you figured it out and actually something has just worked completely differently to all that, and that's kind of blown it out of the water in terms of how you thought stuff landed. I think one of the hardest things when you work in organizations is understanding acronyms. Organizations are really bad at just coming up with their own acronyms, and it's like, is that really helpful to someone that's brand new? Even if it was a permanent employee, I recall a friend who worked at one organization that banned acronyms for diversity perspective. They didn't think it was um, inclusive for people that were new to the organization. Um, so yeah, that's the other thing you spend a lot of time doing, just figuring out what these acronyms mean. And invariably you get sent to some Confluence space or a SharePoint site where they're all documented. And you're like, oh, right, that's what they all mean. And then you'll forget them a few days later.
Can you share one of the examples from your book? Like, what does it look like to really focus on focusing on flow, maybe running a agnostic framework agnostic approach of becoming agile? If you could share with us one of those examples, would be helpful, I think.
Yeah, so if we talk about flow, so classic flow metric throughput, the count of completed items per unit of time. So if you go into an organization as a permanent member of staff or a consultant, if you're increasing flow, then you should be ideally, increasing the value that's being delivered by the organization. So example in the book is where I worked with a team and we focus on breaking work items down so they're smaller so we get faster feedback, and that you'd see an increase in throughput of a over a time period compared to the previous time period when you weren't breaking work down that way. But that can go wrong because you can say to teams in your organization, right, we want to focus on improving throughput, and maybe teams are feel they're very self-sufficient. So they'll think, well, we don't need an agile coach or a consultant or someone to help us. We're just going to focus on breaking our work down. So then we've got a good throughput metric, or our throughput is improving. And what some teams do is they slice work horizontally rather than vertically. So what is one user story or one big user story? They want to break it down. They break it down by technology layer. So in the book, I talk about an example of a reporting team, a data analytics team, and they would have a backlog item, and they would break it down by they would have one user story for the database changes, one user story for the visualization, and I think another for the deployment and release of things. So they were artificially gaming throughput in that sense, and that's where you can go wrong with it. Tons of those have happened over the years with me when I was first getting into this stuff around using data and metrics. Looking at work in progress, and teams don't move stuff in progress because the work in progress number will go up, but actually they've started work on it and they just didn't want to tell me because they knew we were looking at that metric in the stand up. Um, and again, from a flow perspective, you need to provide counterbalance with metrics. So throughput, it could spike up and it could increase when you're comparing a time period, but that work could have been taking a very long time. Let's say the team started a load of stuff and then they just played catch up and then eventually got done and it looks like, oh, I've improved throughput. So a good countermeasure then would be looking at cycle time. So how long that work actually took. So if throughput had increased with a particular team, but cycle time had also increased, then you've not quite made the same improvement as throughput increasing and cycle time decreasing, like delivering more faster, delivering more but slower. And it's a trade-off a lot of the time in organizations. I think a lot of organizations want speed rather than just output. I think speed is where organizations suffer the most. So that's just one example from the book as to kind of how you can use these measures and metrics to showcase your impact in the real world.
I mean, those metrics sound very operational. How would you use them, or what is your approach on the product side of things? Because it's not just about like cranking stuff out really fast. There should be a learning, there should be a feedback loop somehow. But I feel like when people talk about flow and also those flow metrics, their story always ends at, yeah, and then you deliver it and then you get feedback, insert magic feedback process here. And then you start all over again. What is your take on the end, so to say, when you actually delivered stuff? What gives you the agility on a product or service level?
I mean, that's when the work really starts, doesn't it? When you actually put stuff out there, because that's when you can truly learn. Yeah, I think it's interesting because certain organizations that can be the remit. It's just improve flow, and you're not part of that value conversation. And sometimes you just kind of got to accept that and just be like, okay, that's my remit. But if you're like I've been in a number of large organizations, if your organization isn't looking at that kind of thing, you need to force that issue as well. So you can get really good at flow, but if you're not focusing on the value side of things or the impact, then it's suboptimal, really. Like we can all ship stuff that's not very good fast. It's like if it's not very good, we want to focus on good stuff, and maybe that stuff is slower. So yeah, that's when things like impact metrics, product metrics, value metrics, whatever you want to call it, looking at usage, adoption, within the first like 48 hours of putting a feature out there. That's one thing where my current client are kind of re-emphasizing that to them. They're launching new services, and they were saying that one of the new services has got one paying customer. It's been out roughly a week. It's kind of like, but we're waiting till the customer is paying before we know that it added value for one person. How many people actually engage with it so far and are not buying it? Because if 100,000 people have viewed it and only one out of 100,000 has decided that they're going to pay for it, it's probably something not right there with the product or service or journey. And that's where you can start talking about leading and lagging indicators. And very much when I work with product managers or people that are in that product space and they don't have that experience, that's one of the number one things is they don't really focus on leading indicators. It's, if anything, it's all like lagging stuff like revenue or sales or cost saving. And it's like, yeah, that's quite far down the line before you figure that out. Like we should be learning very quickly as to if stuff's right or not. One of the things that I used to do, I don't really mention it in the book. When I used to work at Royal Mail, very public-facing organisation. For context, that people who don't know who Royal Mail is, UK logistics organisation, probably the biggest. Peak time, Christmas period, about 1 million unique visitors to the platform on a daily basis. And I was leading teams, and we were re-architecting the major user journeys that people would go through. So, like, if you want to track an item, so you put a code in, and it tells you where it is in terms of if it's going to be delivered, when it's going to be delivered by. And one of the things that we used to do is within like 24 hours of putting something out, we'd go through all customer comments about it on Twitter. And that's a real eye opener for you if you're not looking at that kind of stuff, because a lot of people like to complain on Twitter, or X as it's now called. And that was a real eye opener for me around where I've been going wrong from an agile perspective. I wasn't focusing enough as to, well, what are real users actually saying about it. So the more you can do that, and more you can talk to real customers, then you start to realize that we can get good at that flow stuff, but that's only one part of it. We need to focus on that value stuff next.
I saw many sprint reviews who ended up with people presenting it to the management, or people present like some sort of metrics, or people would present, but like actually going out there and experiencing it, like sitting there reading through like 20, 30 comments on Twitter. Oof.
Yeah.
Can imagine that being really depressing at some point as well.
Yeah, I mean, I remember one of the things we did with one of the journeys was it was an online postage journey. So if you want to send a parcel or send a letter, you can print your postage at home. You don't need to go to a post office. And we were changing the labels to have a 2D barcode as well as a 1D barcode. So 2D barcode like a QR code, 1D is like you get in a supermarket. And it meant the label size was changing by about half an inch either side. So the business team like had gone through all this and like, yeah, we tested it, we know it works. We put it out, and we had hundreds of customers complain because their old label printing machines, it didn't work. And it was like such a massive oversight. We had to actually roll back the changes and fix them. And that was my last few weeks with the organization. And I was like, oh, again, that was a real eye opener around, getting that feedback a lot sooner would have prevented this. And you're reading comments about it, feedback about it. You're like, oh, this is really disheartening when you've been working on it for months.
Yeah, I was working with a company who provided charging solutions for EVs. And oh boy, when you read those stories about someone on vacation with a kid in a car, stranded somewhere in France, and the charger is just not working and it's just not charging, and they're using your app and they're blaming your app, and you're like, oh, you lose them forever. They're never coming back. After that experience, they're never coming back. Yeah. They just switch the service provider. But I think that, I mean, with all the metrics and everything, that it's probably easy to have like a point of discussion. But I can imagine that when you go to an organization, you're not always finding like the perfect metrics. Like everything is set up already, and you just have to open up the Azure query and look at it, and insight is suddenly coming. Is it hard for you to bring organizations towards measuring those type of things? Are people reluctant? Do people think that they get judged based on their lead time, for example?
I think so. Certainly when I work with prospective clients, I show that kind of thing as to this is what we would be looking to bring to the table. It would be mocked up to better reflect maybe their organization, so it has their branding or whatever. So at least when I'm going in, they know that stuff's coming. but certainly, I've worked like when I worked at ASOS. ASOS has about 100 teams, and there were so many times we were having to reiterate to teams, the stuff around flow. It was about trying to get better. It wasn't right. The best 85th percentile in this organization is 7 days or less, because the context was so different, and that's the thing. Even within your own organization, you had teams that built stuff for the website and the iOS and the Android app, and you had teams that were building software that was used in the back office for video shoots and tagging items in terms of different suppliers and that going through the supply chain. They're not going to have continuous delivery. Like they're going to be doing big enterprise systems, so they're probably going to have set release windows. So there's no way you can be comparing those teams, and you never should. Um, so yeah, when with my organization Thrive, our clients know that flow is what we're about. So we're coming in and we're saying like this is how we're going to measure success. This is what we're going to set up for you, so you know what good looks like. But you still have to spend that time reminding and reminding and reminding as to, it's not about um, your cycle time is dropped, therefore you are bad. It's about using that
Hmm.
as a learning opportunity as to, well, why is it dropped? What could we do to improve that? Are there external things outside your control? Okay, let's go after those and try fix those for you.
What are your like? We already covered this in the beginning that there's sort of has been it has been a peak of the agile hype cycle, if we want to call it that way. And we're already past that. So that means a lot of, let's say, Scrum Masters, Agile coaches, like you just mentioned, drop out of a 2 day course and then prioritize whatever, are now looking for their next project or their next career path or their next client, maybe if they're working as a freelancer. What would your advice be in the current market situation for them to really land a good next project to work on?
I think it would be reflecting on what they've done in their career and where they've really had impact, and better tell that story through their CV. Get into things like blogging and writing, and doing things like this, going to meetups, um, and sharing your experience. Because there's a lot of stuff out there, and it's like writing down stuff that you did, but not what it led to.
Like
Like,
even if you're employed at a big corporation, you're not a consultant or freelancer. Even then,
yeah, I'd say the same. I'd be like, okay, over the last 6 months, what's different because of me? And that's not our Jira is configured correctly. It's like, no, in terms of outcomes for the organization, a team's delivering better? Are there less bugs in production? Is it we're delivering faster? Is it our products have got more users? And kind of really challenge yourself as to, right, where have we actually made a difference? Um, and I think the hard thing then is if you do that and there's someone that I had this conversation with and he went through his CV and he couldn't really think of anything. And it's like, well, okay, start now in your organization. And if you don't have that, then it's really, I think it's kind of really thinking about what you want to do. Like, there's plenty of people out there that can be, your agile project manager that do all the ceremonies, if people want to use that word, or events, and configure Jira or ADO, and they run a fun retro. But if that's the path you choose, then don't be surprised if your job's on the line, not far down the line. Um, yeah, that would be my advice. We kind of really, really reflect as to, okay, the stuff I've done or been involved with, what are the real outcomes that have happened as a result of that? And then you might be able to better demonstrate in terms of what it is you're bringing to the table. And if you don't know what kind of thing that is, you should be looking at. Anyone that's looking for a role, message me on LinkedIn. I'll happily send you a free copy of my book. because I think it's more important that people can get out of that situation. So yeah, if you're listening and you need some help, then drop me a message.
Perfect. Hey, thanks, man, for coming on to the show. And if people want to reach out, go check out Nick's LinkedIn. I will provide all the links in the show notes. So now's a good time to open up your Spotify app or whatever you're looking at and check it out. All right. See you very, very soon. Thanks, Nick, for coming by.
No worries. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Stellar Work podcast. If you enjoyed our conversation, be sure to check out our other episodes for more insights and inspirational stories from leaders across the world of work. Don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn, Blue Sky, or even YouTube if you're into that. And for updates, behind the scenes, content, and more, check out our social media channels or just reach out via email on info@stellarwork.com. If you found this episode valuable, please recommend the podcast to a friend or colleague who might enjoy it too. Your support means the world to me and helps the show grow. And one last thing, we love co-creating our guest list with you. Yes, you listening out there. If you have someone in mind who'd make a great guest, or if you'd like to pitch yourself, head over to our guest forum in the show notes and let us know. We can't wait hearing your suggestions. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.